Hello, friends, and welcome into Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast, and it is Week 13 ranks. We've got running backs. That's right. We are toting the rock here with Pat Fitzmaurice and Scott Pianowski, my two buddies, as we are going to get into a very critical Week 13, and it just so happens that Mr. Scott Pianowski is going to get a little love rank here. As we always do on these shows, we like to shout out everybody in the ranks contest, usually Wednesday mornings, late Tuesday, we've got the weekly end to every rank contest. So week 13, 12, 11, this past week, Muntradamus from Beast Dome, what a name, what an ultimate name, came in at number 1 in the week 12 accuracy ranks. Anderson Pickard from Primetime Sports Talk at number 2, and Adam Dove from the Fantasy Couriers number 3. Those are your top 3 most accurate week 12 rankers. But inside the top 25, it is him, Scott Pianowski. I think we have all now officially on this show been inside the top 25 of this contest. From Mick to me to Pat, Scott, we are all top 25. Scott, congratulations. That's a pretty good finish out on week 12.
Thank you. With the college basketball season kicking in, I'm focused on being in the top 25. You're sick of being one of the also receiving votes teams. So happy to get my name on the board and edge out you fine folks. But hey, it's week 13, man. Everybody's in play. We're jostling for fantasy position. So there's no better time to maybe improve on that standing than right now.
It is serious crunch time. And Pat also, by the way, was in like the 30s, not to not acknowledge that. And anything inside the top 50, I think is really good. Pat has been rocking all year. Pat, are you ready for week 13? It's been this weird space where I've been telling everybody it's like in regular fantasy leagues, it's this week and next week. So it is absolutely critical. I got people in my, DMs, a couple athletes that are in there doing like, I have to win this week, helping out. But then you also have like the FFPCs of the world that are moving off to the playoffs. So it's like week 13 hits and just go time, crunch time happens. We've even got a little bit of a waiver wire conversation of a player that it might be in the ranks this week. But are you prepared for this week 13, Mr. Pat Fitzmaurice?
I am prepared, Welsh, and it is a big week. It seems like for whatever reason, half of my redraft teams are like 7-5. And I'm like, that's not a humble brag, but like that's sitting in 5th or 6th in every league where, okay, looking pretty good for playoff position, but got to get at least one more win in these last couple of weeks. So it would be nice to get the wins in week 13, not have to sweat it out in week 14. We'll see.
And
does that means, Pat, that you are the Denver Broncos? You're 7-5. You're ahead of schedule. You're having a nice season, but you got to finish the job. And I don't know about you guys, Pat. I don't know about you, Chris, but I get text messages this time of the year from people I don't hear from all season because all of a sudden the stakes are higher and people start second guessing themselves, or they just want the reassurance of somebody to agree with them or whatever it is. So it's always a nice check-in. People text me. I'm like, oh, they're wishing me a happy Thanksgiving, or they're wishing me a happy holidays, whatever it is. No. They're starting to feel the pinch of week 13.
Everybody, I know all the texts. I'm waiting for all of these. Happy Thanksgiving. What are we having for Mac? Are we doing the White Russians? It's like, no. What do you think about Jeremy McNichols? And I'm like, all right, that's what we're gonna do.
The college friend you haven't heard from 3 years ago. It's like, oh, he's checking in. No, tour Stafford this week.
That's right.
This game.
Mickey Mantle used to tell a joke about when he would go to be judged after he died, and they'd say, sorry, Mick, we can't let you in. You just didn't live the life on Earth that we wanted you to. But we have like 7 baseballs. Could you sign them for us? And my version of that has always been like, sorry, Pianow, you did a couple of things we didn't like, but before you go, I need 2 receivers and flex.
That sounds just about right. And it'll only get worse next week because, week 14, we got buys and Derrick Henry, and it's going to be gross. But we'll tackle that when we get there. We are going to get into these running back ranks. We've got 36 of them. We're going to give you where you can find them, of course, on Fantasy Pros. We're going to give you that top 36. Talk about some of the biggest questions, all of that under the sun. But first, I want to make sure to give away something. We are thankful to all of our wonderful listeners, and we are giving you a chance to win a signed Josh Allen Bills autograph helmet, free courtesy of our friends at pristineauction.com. All you've got to do is head over to fantasypros.com/contest. As we have mentioned this month, complete the form, download the Draft Wizard app, leave a review on the podcast, follow us on the socials, X, Instagram, TikTok, at Fantasy Pros. 1 is an entry. All of them, they're all entries. So go and do that today. We'll be announcing a winner on the podcast here very, very soon. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, turn on the noties, be alerted of new episodes, and for your ability to claim this amazing prize, which luckily will not be covered in snow for you this weekend, though Josh Allen's real-life helmet should be absolutely drenched in snow going up against the 49ers and probably winning by 37. All right, let's get into this, gentlemen. If you guys are ready, going to the RB big board. We're going to start this week with Saquon Barkley, coming off of a 300 total yard performance, is going up against the Baltimore Ravens. What a matchup, too, by the way, of Barkley versus Henry. You know, they really like league-winning type of guys you could have gotten the second round. Saquon is number 1. Joe Mixon at 2 going up against the Jags. Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, Alvin Kamara. That is your top 5. No Derrick Henry yet. We've got Devon Achane, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Kyron Williams, Breece Hall, Josh Jacobs, and Chase Brown. Those are your core running backs in the top 12. Questions, not really too many of them. I am curious, is there any hesitation, Pat, with, I say this lightly in just maybe throwing this out at people. You're not going to not start Christian McCaffrey or anything like that, but the offense was putrid, and they've got a really big weather game. So maybe, if anything, just some thoughts, because we're not doing anything outside of Christian McCaffrey, but it should be gross. At least it looks like a big old snowball type of game. Could keep the ball on the ground, but they could not move the ball with Brandon Allen. Probably need to get Jordan Mason more involved, and that might also take him out of the passing game. Just any general thoughts on McCaffrey this week? Because this is the lowest he's been active and ranked in, I don't even know how long, at 7.
Yeah, I'm inclined to sometimes even favor the running backs a little in a snow game, although with McCaffrey, a different type of running back who derives a lot of his value from catching passes. And this offense just didn't look good in Green Bay a week ago. So, yeah, I mean, like, you're going to start Christian McCaffrey no matter what, but he is no longer a slam dunk top 5 running back with this offense sort of broken right now. And I don't know if we're going to see Purdy come back, and we'll have to keep abreast of these weather reports, because it sounds like it's going to get pretty gnarly in Buffalo.
That's the early signs. Yeah, those are early. Where do you have him ranked, by the way, McCaffrey?
I think I'm one above consensus at RB6 as of now.
Okay. Same thing, Scott. Is there any, I don't know, reservation, hesitation? Like you would be sick to your stomach if you were putting, literally any other running back in over a Christian McCaffrey. So that's not really a question. It's just these weird weather games. You just really don't know what you're going to get out of it. And their offense, they just don't move the ball right now. So general thoughts and rank.
Yeah, I think the snow game we saw last week, that glorious Cleveland-Pittsburgh game, it just reminded us that snow doesn't necessarily kill offense. I realized that wasn't a track meet by any means, but plenty of guys got home in that game. The worries I have with McCaffrey are more tied to Trent Williams. Is he healthy? Is he going to play? Are we going to see? I think Purdy will play. How healthy is he? This offense has not been anywhere close to the Niners offense we expected. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. It's one of these things where it's like a monster movie or a horror movie where you're just petrified that the chainsaw killer is in the closet. Maybe the chainsaw killer is not in the closet, or maybe there's just that, Kyle Shanahan doesn't have the chainsaw. So unfortunately, there's no satisfying advice for McCaffrey. Your trade deadline's probably coming on. You can't bench him. He's still a top 10 back for me. I think I have him a couple of slots lower than Pat does, but the buoyancy of this offense isn't here right now. This is not the Niners offense we signed up for. And so McCaffrey is a lower end RB1. At this point, you would he's missed his projection all 3 weeks, right? He hasn't been a top 10 running back in any week. He's fallen short of projection. He just looks like another good player right now, but not the dynamic Christian McCaffrey we're used to. And just another case of, if you were injury optimistic, Christian McCaffrey's going to save my season after missing, almost 3 months. I mean, that hasn't played out at all. And this is just a case of a reminder that you have to be realistic about these guys you wait for, because they don't always step back into their normal functionality and they hit the high end of the range right away. That's just very rare for anybody in the National Football League.
One other that I want to talk about is RB10 in this is Breece Hall. And the reason behind it is we got a report today as we're recording this that Breece Hall did not practice. And Ulbrich says that he is still hopeful that Hall is going to be able to play this Sunday, because apparently he tweaked his knee in the Indy game. So, Scott, we'll start with you. The cautiousness of that is probably going to adjust his rank. If he does play, knowing this now, are you going to lower him? And if he doesn't play, where do you think Braylon Allen is going to slot?
You're probably in the 30s for Allen, although I always defer to Pat on any Wisconsin running back, other than maybe James White, who played for my Patriots for a while. But um, I'm just encouraged to hear that the Jets practice, because every time I watch them play offense, I wonder if they just met before the game 5 minutes. They found 11 guys that Aaron Rodgers apparently likes, 10 guys, whatever. I'm so ready to unsubscribe from Aaron Rodgers. I don't know what button you have to click. I don't know what phone number you have to call, how long you have to be on hold, but just get Aaron Rodgers out of my life. But look, Hall is somebody I'm going to play. I know Seattle defense has played a lot better of late. I think Seattle will win this game, but Hall's a 3-down back. Allen, after having somewhat of a sprinkling role, he almost had for a second some standalone value. That's kind of been out the window. I can only play Allen if Hall is scratched, but the Jets might be the most disappointing team in the NFL. And Hall is somebody you can play. I really don't want to play Garrett Wilson anymore. Devontae Adams, I don't want to play. Rodgers has been off my list for a while. It's just amazing. This offense is basically, you can play the starting running back, and that's, I guess you have to play Garrett Wilson, who's a great player in a bad situation. He's basically going to have the Terry McLaurin career, I guess, although McLaurin's finally paying it off this year. But, we'll have to wait until season 5 or season 6 for Garrett Wilson. But you have to play Hall, but the Jets are going to score, 13 points, 17 points? You just hope that there's a touchdown or two that maybe Hall gets in on that.
Yeah, Pat, I know we have to play. We're saying we have to play Hall, but do we? If he is banged up and tweaked here and they hope he's going to play, to me, that speaks maybe the workload comes down a little bit. So same question, knowing what we know now, and he plays, where will you rank Hall? If Hall is inactive, where does Braylon Allen fall for you?
I initially had Hall RB11. I've dropped him to RB13. I might drop him a little further. And if Hall were out entirely, I'd probably have Allen somewhere in running back 2 range, maybe 19-ish or so. Allen he got off to that great start where he looked fabulous and was just running people over and looked like faster than he had ever looked in Madison when he played for the Badgers. But lately he hasn't been as good. I think over the last month and a half, he's averaging, I don't know if he's even averaging 3 yards per carry. But of course, with him, it's all been small sample sizes. So really hard to tell. But he certainly would become playable if Breece Hall were scratched.
If it was just Allen and Breece were out, who would you rather, Braylon Allen versus the Seahawks or Rico Dowdle versus the Giants?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's on the spot.
Probably Rico, and I've got Rico. So I guess I would have Allen more in the mid-20s because I think I've got Rico at 23 or 24.
I might lean Allen. Scott, any take on that?
A slight preference to Rico because Cooper Rush has been good enough that the offense is taken off the restricted list. And isn't it nice when quarterbacks do that, right? Bryce Young has taken the Panthers offense off the restricted list. Cooper Rush has taken the Cowboys offense off the restricted list. Not that I'm thrilled to play Rico Dowdle, but I think he's a pretty solid running back too.
Yeah. Plus, Welsh, we don't know. If Breece Hall were to be scratched, possible that Isaiah Davis gets some of the work for the Jets. We don't know that would be an 80%, 90% share for Braylon Allen automatically if Hall were out.
Just one of those things. If he's floating out there, it would benefit everybody to pick him up. There's quite a few. It's actually ironic. In week 13, we've had a couple really slow waiver weeks, and week 13 we have, in theory, 3 backs that could be taking over a role from a guy that's out, which is, I don't know. That speaks to the zero running back crew or the people that saved their fab. They're going to be in a good spot. Let's go to running back 2s here, and let's kick over to number 13 on the big board, Jonathan Taylor up against New England. He comes in at 13, followed by Ken Walker, James Cook, Bucky Irving at 16, Aaron Jones, Chuba Hubbard, David Montgomery, James Conner. That rounds out your top 20. Tony Pollard, Tyrone Tracy, aforementioned Rico Dowdle, and Ramondre Stevenson at 24. Pat, we had a lot of conversations about Bucky Irving this past Sunday. You did the Sunday live stream with me, and I felt pretty vindicated because I'm a pretty pro Bucky Irving. I didn't rank super well this week, but I sure did hit on the Bucky Irving side. This week, he's coming in off of, his performance last week with a really, really solid rank of 16 going up against the Carolina Panthers, which is an incredible matchup. So ECR 16. But both of you guys got him lower. So Fitz, let's start with you. You've got him at RB 19 this week. Your take on Bucky Irving. It's still a nice rank inside the top 20. It's an incredible matchup. Talk to us about Bucky.
Yeah, when I was putting my rankings together on Monday, I landed at running back 19 for Bucky and was thinking that seemed kind of high. And then ECR comes out on Tuesday and I realize I'm 3 spots below consensus. It's about as high as I can get on a guy in a split backfield, even though the matchup against the Panthers is ultra favorable. But it pains me to fade Bucky because he has been so impressive this year. 5.4 yards per attempt, catches passes. Among all running backs with at least 40 carries, Bucky is number 2 in yards after contact per carry with 4.19. He's 9th in breakaway run rate. And all of that statistical goodness shows up when you watch Bucky. Like, he is a fun watch. He's slippery. He's an ankle breaker. He'll string together moves. He makes defenses look like the Keystone Cops at times out there. So I'm probably at least 1 spot too low on him. Might have to creep him up a little bit, but I never like being overly high on a guy who's basically splitting work 50-50, and that's the case with Bucky and Rachaad White.
I think that's definitely the case that they're splitting it at the 50-50 mark. It's just they use the running backs a lot, and both of these guys get a lot of touches, and Bucky is optimizing every single one of those. You just would love to see him get to 20 plus. I think what he ended up like 18, like 12 carries and a handful of catches, somewhere around there. But Scott, you got him about the same rank. Probably a similar take in general on Bucky Irving, that the total workload is what scares you off from ranking him higher.
Yeah, I echo pretty much everything Pat said. I mean, Irving's been fantastic. He's been just as good a receiver as Rachaad White, where we thought maybe White would have the check mark there, and he's been certainly the most explosive back here. What also makes me a little bit nervous, I know this hasn't been sticky every week, but there's just been some weeks where Sean Tucker has gotten some run. He got 4 carries last week. He got a touchdown. 4 different Tampa Bay players had rushing touchdowns last week, including Baker Mayfield. So if you're a Bucky Irving manager or a White manager, I mean, you need Tucker to not be a factor. You don't want him to steal 5 touches here. And man, the target tree for the passing game was the phone book too. So Tampa Bay is an offense. We love their playoff schedule, right? They get Carolina this week. They have another Carolina game later in the fantasy playoffs. Tampa Bay has maybe the best fantasy schedule of all the teams, but you'd like to see a more tight concentration of where the ball's going. But sometimes you just have to bet on talent and the idea. And I know there's going to be some hot hand element to this, but if I'm going to bet on anybody ripping off a 19-yard run with Tampa Bay, it's Bucky Irving. And the fact that he's been just as good as a receiver as White, and they basically made their statement with their usage that, yeah, it's a committee, but Irving is the 1A to White's 1B. I think you can start Irving with a fair amount of confidence.
Yeah, and a key I just also throw out when you watch that game, the Sean Tucker touchdown came off of a big Bucky run, and he was pissed when he got taken out. And then Sean Tucker, the same thing happened again, and that's where Sean Tucker fumbled at the goal line. And then the next opportunity, Bucky Irving was given that. So maybe something to look out for the future, even a little bit more upside. And I agree. I'm betting on the talent of Bucky Irving. I'll be the high guy of us 3 on Bucky again, even without 20, 25 plus touches.
I'm glad to see somebody can fumble at the goal line who isn't named Tyrone Tracy, because I feel like he's done that like 17 times.
Well, we're going to talk about Tyrone Tracy because he comes in at ECR 22 this week. You've got him, Scott, right at ECR. Fitz is a tiny bit higher. He's going up against the Dallas Cowboys, 4-star rating, a B- grade. He's the final RB, it looks like, or I guess him and Rico are the final ones that go from B to the C range. So why don't you kick us off here with Tyrone Tracy? Offense is kind of a rough go in general. It's the Dallas Cowboys as far as the matchup. What say you on Tyrone Tracy and his fumbles?
Yeah, I would love to have him in the top 20, but the fact that he's been putting the ball on the ground, they actually vultured a touchdown to Devin Singletary, who would, obviously is not the talent that Tracy is right now. And maybe the Tommy Cutlett story can have like the Cooper Rush trajectory where it's like, okay, the first game was bad, but things get better. But he's a little bit dinged up. I don't know if Drew Lock's going to play. Brian Dable coaching for his job. Malik Neighbors is unhappy with his role. It's just so much chaos in this Giants offense right now. And the Dallas, they've been competitive lately. I mean, they should have won that game easily at Washington. It had a very chaotic ending. What a fun week 12 it was in the NFL, especially that early window was a blast. But I think Tracy is somebody I would have said 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah, if you have Tracy, you're playing him. You have to have absolute royalty to bench him. I think there's enough just tiny little nicks. I don't even want to call them flags. It's just, I feel like I'm nitpicking because you want to bet on talent. He's an explosive player. He makes yards after contact. He gets to the second level regularly, but coaches hate fumbles. And I'm just afraid that maybe Devin Singletary's touchdown equity, which might have been 0% a couple of weeks ago. It might be like maybe 15 or 20% now. And God forbid, if Tracy should fumble in the first half, I could see him getting benched for it. So I'm just a little bit of trepidation before I sign up for a running back on an offense that right now is pretty hard to trust.
No Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, or Tyrone Tracy this week.
I think I'd have to go Allen.
I think I might be with you. Fitz, you're a little bit higher. You do have him at RB20. So let's talk some optimism on Tyrone Tracy.
Yeah, I mean, there's unquestionably risk here, as Scott pointed out, with the fumbling issue. He's fumbled 3 times in his last 2 games, lost a fumble in each of the last 2. His overtime fumble against the Panthers in Week 10 pretty much handed Carolina that game in Germany. So it's possible Tracy sees a work reduction this week, just based on fumbles in recent weeks. And if he puts another one on the ground, like, he might be permanently on the bench for the rest of the game, and you wind up with 3 or 4 fantasy points. But I think Tracy does look like a special player. PFF right now has the Giants graded 23rd in run blocking, and Tracy is still averaging 5.1 yards per carry. Like, that is a commentary on how good he has been as a runner. And he adds utility as a pass catcher, as a former college wide receiver. And he gets this delectable Thanksgiving Day matchup against the Cowboys, who are 29th in DVOA against the run. So it all lines up. But yeah, this fumbling thing could kind of short circuit Tyrone Tracy's day on Thanksgiving.
Singletary being a vulture. You never want to see that. All right, we've got flex running backs. But first, the NFL season is rolling along, and the contenders are separating from the pack. The one thing that hasn't changed this season, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And DraftKings is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Fade to the quarter of the end zone, running backs break through the line and gallop 60 yards to score. We don't care how they get them. Well, we do in fantasy, but we just want to bet on touchdowns. At DraftKings, it is the place to do it. We talked about Bucky Irving, the usage, maybe getting those touchdown goal line opportunities over Sean Tucker this week. Well, guess what? You can get plus money on DraftKings at plus 110 for a Bucky Irving touchdown against the Carolina Panthers in an amazing matchup. Go and hit that today. And here's another reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, RBs 25 through 36. A little bit of meat in this one. Najee Harris coming in at 25. We've got DeAndre Swift, Kareem Hunt, Rashad White, Nick Chubb, and Jalen Warren rounds out the 30, followed by Travis Etienne, Isaiah Pacheco, Gus Edwards, Jeremy McNichols, Javonte Williams, and Tank Bigsby. Oh, gentlemen, there are a lot of questions in this one, and let's start with the Chiefs backfield. Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt obviously takes a hit as far as his rank. I think he was into the high to mid-teens early last week. He falls down here to 27 with Pacheco active, but Pacheco comes in at 32. So there's definitely a hand-up situation that's going on here. The matchup, it's against Las Vegas. It's a good 4-star rating, even though they give it C+ because of the usage. Pat, let's start with you. What do you think Isaiah Pacheco's volume is? And that directly most likely correlates to what is taken away from Kareem Hunt and his value dropping down. So how do you make do of this RB situation?
I mean, my guess is 55-45 Hunt Pacheco. And that is just a complete guess. It could be Pacheco getting 16 carries and Hunt gets 6. And it's probably not going to be as close to 50-50 as I'm saying. It's probably more of a decided split. I know they asked Chiefs offensive coordinator Matt Nagy about this, and he gave kind of a cryptic reply that didn't resolve anything. I guess my thinking on having Kareem Hunt ranked about 6 spots or so ahead of Isaiah Pacheco is that with the Chiefs at 10-1, they have the luxury of kind of slow rolling Pacheco's return and just not rushing him back. Why give him 15 plus carries when, he's clearly the better running back, I think, than Kareem Hunt, who has performed admirably in Pacheco's absence, but is not the playmaker that Pacheco is. So why risk your three-peat hopes with a Pacheco re-injury potentially? So I feel like Hunt gets more work here, although that is certainly not a confident prediction.
I feel like ultimately this whole thing just comes down to like, are you comfortable starting either one of those? And I think the easy answer is probably not. You don't feel comfortable. I think Pacheco is probably the biggest potential dud of all of these. But Scott, what do you say here? You know, if you had both of these, I have Pacheco in a spot. I'm not going to start him this week. Maybe I don't even have like luxury, but I think I have, you know, just some options that it's not like, you know, Pacheco or Jerome Ford. If that were the case, maybe I just, you know, throw a dart and try to put Pacheco out there, because you never know. They could put him in a goal line situation. He scores a touchdown and 5 carries. He saves his day. But I feel like it's really hard to envision that he's going to get some mass volume of carries this week. But Scott, what say you?
Yeah, I need a prove it week from Pacheco. I will not start him proactively. I would think maybe 70-30 sounds like a likely split. Obviously, things can change in the middle of the game. If there's an injury, if there's a fumble. Just remember the Chiefs, you know, they lost to Buffalo, but they're still in control of the AFC. They're in control of their division. I don't see any good reason. This is just one of those, okay, get some reps, get Isaiah Pacheco hit again, get him in the flow of things. You know, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be, oh, yeah, Isaiah Pacheco played 15 snaps or something like that, 20 snaps. I can't see him getting anything close to a role I could feel good about. And Hunt, I don't know. He's still got a fair amount of goal line equity. I mean, he eventually is going to pass the baton to Pacheco. I just don't think it's going to be this week. It's a Friday game. It's an out of routine game. I don't know why it would make any sense for Pacheco to come back to a heavy role here. So you're glad he comes back. This is another reason why I often fade these long-term returnee guys, is that when they come back, you need that gap week. You need the show me week where we know their conditioning is in place and their role is back to normal. So even though you may have waited on Pacheco this long, a lot of people are not going to start him this week. Everybody's in play, and it's a prudent decision to keep him on the bench. So when you're looking in the future for guys who are out long-term, remember there's a lot of times that extra week where they're in uniform, but they're not really playable, that just delays their fantasy usefulness for another week. And I think it's something that doesn't always get factored in.
So there's a couple of really interesting running back situations let's talk about. Let's start with the Commanders one. There's some questions that we don't have answered, I suppose, at this second. We pretty much, we know Eckler's not going to be out with it. We're not going to play with a concussion. There's an ankle injury with Brian Robinson, and you guys can correct me if you've seen the report. I know that there was optimism that it wasn't a high ankle sprain, but it leaves in some serious questions that he plays this week. I personally do not believe that he plays. And in comes Jeremy McNichols, who was my top target for waivers, even if it's just 1 week. He has a rank of 34, and I believe that rank is people throwing in, he's probably going to be the guy, but Brian Robinson's still floating around. Pat, let's start with you. Brian Robinson, first off, do you expect Brian Robinson to play? And if not, with Jeremy McNichols, if he is the sole guy, where do you think he properly should be ranked?
Well, the signs kind of point to Robinson not playing, considering not only did the Commanders sort of re-sign Chris Rodriguez from, I'm not sure if he was on the practice squad or they may have released him, but then they re-signed him and now he's going to be active again. But I think I saw that the Commanders also worked out this week, like Boston Scott and James Robinson. So that would certainly suggest that Brian Robinson's week 13 status is in jeopardy. So I'm probably going to remove Brian Robinson from my rankings. He's in there now, and move up McNichols to about RB 25, 26 or so. He's a capable player. And I think like when he was sort of first breaking into the NFL, he was sort of a designated passing down back. So, he's got dual threat potential. Yeah, and it does seem like he's going to be the primary back for Washington, more likely than not.
Okay, so then would you rather Jeremy McNichols in that backfield alone or Kareem Hunt with Pacheco active this week?
I would go with McNichols.
See, that's where I'm at too. Scott, same question. McNichols, he's the sole back. Where does he rank? And then would you rather Hunt or McNichols?
Yeah, I think McNichols too. It's interesting what Pat mentioned that McNichols was an active pass catcher back in his Tennessee days, because they have not used him at all in that role this year. He only has 3 catches, but Eckler's such a good pass catcher that maybe that speaks to it. And also McNichols has a better success rate this year. I know it's hard to know sometimes with backup running backs. How do we handle their efficiency? It's almost like comparing a relief pitcher to a starting pitcher in baseball. It's not an apples to apples comp, but he does have the best efficiency rating or success rate in this backfield. So I would think in a game, Washington should control. I know they're on a 3-game losing streak. I know the Tennessee defense isn't that bad. Usually the Titans give games away because Will Levis does 4 or 5 things wrong. But bottom line, at the end of the day, I think 15 to 18 touches for McNichols and maybe a 60% chance at a touchdown. That's what kind of game I'm looking for in week 13.
All right, the third back of this triad of potential starts that are out there. We talked about Braylon Allen, who could be. Jeremy McNichols looks like he will be. We got an affirmative. It is happening. J.K. Dobbins is not going to play in week 13, and it looks like for the foreseeable future, might be the rest of the season. The Ravens curse poor J.K. Dobbins. What that does is that thrusts Gus Edwards into the lead back role. It also throws in, the other potential guys. I think they had Haskins active. You got Vidal, like where are they going to go with that? But I think the question to talk about is Gus Edwards here. Gus Edwards' ECR prior to the news this morning was at 41. Fitch, you look like you had been kind of aggressively ranking him like J.K. Dobbins was going to be out. So let's just start with you. We know Dobbins is out. Is Gus Edwards going to be the main guy, or are they going to sprinkle in these others? And how do you rank him for this week?
RB33, yes, main guy, but a sprinkling of either Haskins or Kamani Vidal or both. Gus is 29 years old. He's a plotter. He doesn't offer any pass catching upside whatsoever, but he's very familiar with the Greg Roman system and vice versa. Greg Roman knows exactly what he's getting from Gus Edwards. So I would expect Gus to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 carries with, 0 catches. And considering that he just has no explosiveness whatsoever, I mean, you kind of really need him to fall into the end zone for him to pay off. That's why I can't really get him any higher than like mid-range to low-end RB3.
It's what he used to do. It's all he used to do. I was like my number one touchdown bet in week 1 was like Gus Edwards is all he does. Scott, rank Braylon Allen without Breece Hall, Gus Edwards, and Jeremy McNichols in your order of favorites to start.
Yeah, Allen, McNichols, Edwards for me. And yeah, it's going to have to be touchdown deodorant for Gus Edwards. But the good news is, although the Falcons have not allowed a lot of fantasy points to running backs, the metrics say that their rushing defense is ordinary. And we saw last Monday, right? I mean, Gus Edwards, 9 carries, 11 yards, but then late in the game, they got near the goal line. They called his number. So it's almost like you're streaming a tight end here and you're just hoping for the touchdown to pay it off. That's who Gus Edwards is. He will not catch a pass for you. He will not make an explosive play for you, but he will get double-digit touches, and he's got goal line equity, and that's always going to be playable in fantasy.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the big key here is this offense is humming, and if they get into the red zone, he's probably going to be the number one guy if they're comfortable running the ball with him. So Gus Edwards, a viable Week 13 start, yes. Jeremy McNichols, yes. Crazy. Maybe Braylon Allen. A lot of big stuff, a lot of big questions. And that is why we are here for you, except not this week. I still have this promo in here, but we are not going to be live. We have been live mostly on Thursdays, but that's Thanksgiving. So make sure you're tuned in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel so you can see any of those live feeds that we jump into, answer all of your start and sit questions. Plus, if you guys need to, you can zip on over to our Discord at fantasypros.com/chat. Join up on the free Discord. You can check out all the great rooms, the amazing community. We've got AMAs. We've got a Pat AMA. I've got an AMA room. You can come in and ask us questions, and you can be part of live podcasts where you can come up, you can talk to us and ask those questions. We just did one on Monday for Out of Bounds. We usually do a Thursday one, the extra point with Erickson and I. Thanksgiving, we're not going to, but we got you covered. Check it out, fantasypros.com/chat. For Pat Fitzmaurice and Scott Pianowski, I'm Chris Welsh. Those are the RB ranks for Week 13. Good luck, and we'll talk to you next time right here on Fantasy Pros.